Hey everyone, and welcome back to our next episode of PokePaths. When we last left off, we had just caught our new team member Mama to join team member Squirt the Squirtle. Before moving on, I wanted to see a little bit more about who we could find here on Route 22, any other Pokemon. What's interesting about how some of these Pokemon games evolve is that you always have a actually, let's do some switch training. So before I talk about that, one of the really key ways to train up Pokemon members that, funny enough, I never thought of before, took me a while to think of, is by switch training. So that is by taking a weaker Pokemon and putting them in the front of your party, and then switching them out for a stronger one like Squirt, who will get a critical hit at the right time to take down what can sometimes be a pretty pesky Rattata. So a lot of times it's really easy to be able to stay in a patch of grass where you caught a Pokemon and do some switch training. I've always found that that is quicker than maybe going back to a different route, just because you're getting more experience overall for your team. So even though you might not be getting as much experience for Mama right now or for your Nidoran who you just caught, you're also getting about half that experience for Squirt too. So in some of these older games where you don't have an experience share or party-wide experience share, it is a little bit of an easier way to train up a Pokemon and train up your whole team. So there we go, we just got Mama to level 4. I think I'm going to train up Mama a little bit more to level 5 until we can see that she can start making some more moves on actually taking down some Pokemon on her own. One of the main reasons that you want to train up anyone that you have in this beginning is because you are going to have your upcoming rival fight on Route 22. Now that is a fight that you do want to take on. Here it's optional in this game. It's actually, I think, optional in all of the Kanto games where you would have this fight. But it's a great way to get experience. I also think that one little funny tidbit about this rival fight is that it has a little bit of a it can affect your story a little bit in Pokemon Yellow. So in Pokemon Yellow version, which was released a little bit after Red and Blue and Red and Green, Yellow also follows Kanto. It's also released for the Game Boy, but you start off with Pikachu as your starter. It was modeled after the anime, and your rival starts off with an Eevee. And what's interesting about the Eevee is that the way that you can actually determine which evolution your rival will evolve its Eevee into based on whether you beat your rival in these first two fights. So, for example, I think if you win both of them, he ends up evolving the Eevee into Jolteon. If you split, or if you lose both, that depends on whether he evolves into Vaporeon or Flareon. It took me a long time, or it was a while until I learned some of that. So Mama here knows Tackle, I believe around level... I think it's around level 7 or 8 or so around here. Mama will actually learn Scratch, which Scratch in this generation has 5 hit points or attack points more than Tackle. Now that might not seem like a lot right now, and it probably isn't, but for this rival fight it's good to have. I want to get things moving a little bit though, so instead of staying here like I would normally do to train Mama all the way up, I think what we might do is we might wait until Mama gets maybe one more level, and then we'll go into the rival fight. I also find it funny, I mean, we haven't done a ton of battles here yet, but as I mentioned last time, the encounter table for the Nidorans is flipped in Gen 1 and for Red and Blue. So, starts off in Pokemon Red, you have a 35% chance of... There we go. I wonder, you know what? Maybe we just try it. Yeah, I'm going to just try the rival battle without healing here. One of the reasons why we can do that is because our rival doesn't actually have, his Bulbasaur actually doesn't have really any moves that can hurt us right now. I also find it funny that they have different music for the rival battles, which is really like a typical battle music, but also his approaching music. I always thought it was funny that he had this very iconic music when he starts to approach you. Alright, let's see. Alright, Mama. Let's try one more attack. Well, I guess we can get 2 more attacks from Mama. Now, let's hope for not a critical hit. Oh, okay, that did a little bit more damage than I thought. Gen 1 has a range of damage that it can do, or that any Pokemon can do. So sometimes, you might get a low roll versus a high roll, and you might be thinking you could survive a hit, and you actually end up not being able to, or vice versa. Yeah, this is going to be tough. I think we might have to use our other potion here. Alright. So Mama gained some good experience. And so did Squirt. Alright. Alright, he's going to use Bulbasaur. So, you know what? Let's not chance anything here. Why don't we just... He's probably going to lay down a Leech Seed at a certain point to start getting health back. And we want to make sure we do as much damage against him while we can before that point. Bulbasaur actually is not doing anything to us with those tackles. Oh man. Alright, we're in pretty good shape here. Yeah, let's just take him out. We don't want to lose this fight. I might have to redo it again. That doesn't make for a very interesting stream. Alright, Gregory defeated Andrew. So one thing that I mentioned earlier is about the Universal Party Experience share in later games. This is the music I love. And his hair bobbing. I mean, they coded this guy to be so cocky in these games. And I always thought it was funny. He really came off as hateable when you initially played it. And I think too, as when you're a little kid and you're playing this game for the first time, I think one of the reasons that he comes off as so hateable is his grandfather is the professor. He knows apparently all this stuff about Pokemon, and you are just picking up this game for the first time, and you have no idea what's going on in this game. And so he really can take it to a level that's that makes you feel inferior, or that you think he thinks you're inferior to him. All right. Funny enough, here's the Nidoran male. You know what? I don't think we're going to use it. Well, we're definitely not going to use it now. I was going to try and knock it down a little bit to be able to catch it, but at a 5% encounter in Pokemon Blue, I think we'll stick with our female Nidoran. This is also, speaking of the Nidorans, one of the first games. It is the first game, but it's the only game that doesn't have a gender to any Pokemon, except for those Nidorans. They are 2 different species, even though they're both called Nidoran. But one is Nidoran male and one is Nidoran female. But they're completely different evolutionary lines, or were, until I believe an egg from a Nidoran male. I believe if you breed it with a Ditto, or even with a Nidoran female, you have near even odds of getting a Nidoran male or Nidoran female in the egg. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they have the same evolutionary line in eggs, which is a nice little nod to this original game setup. We did not get a Rattata here. Sorry. Now, Viridian Forest is a ton of fun. Viridian Forest is one of those places when you initially start off that I always thought the music was pretty cool. It was a little bit eerie. When you talk to this trainer, he mentions that he came in with some friends, and they're out for Pokemon fights. So he gives you just a little bit of an intro into what you're gonna face here. It was a place where, when you first play the game, you think that there's so much room in here, and really it's not that much of a maze when you really play it all out. I think it's just that you end up, once you know how to go or where to go, you end up being able to figure it out. So you can avoid that trainer by going into the tall grass here. There's a lot of routes in Pokemon that will reward you with not having a trainer fight if you decide to chance going into tall grass. But here, because we need some experience, I think it's worthwhile at least going in to the grass and also fighting some of these trainers. Now, I think we're going to switch to Squirt. I don't want to be running back and forth too much to go heal. I think it just doesn't make for a great stream or a great time. But let's hope here. Weedle can poison you, I believe, with Poison Sting. So I'd rather just take the string shots here. Weedle is a Pokemon who I don't think gets a ton of love in games because of Ash's Butterfree in the anime. So Ash seems to favor Caterpie by catching one, and Beedrill is sort of seen as the scarier alternative here. Yeah, let's switch train again for giving Mama some experience. But, I have run both of them. And here, let's actually fight Mama here, because I don't think Caterpie can do anything to us other than take down health or lower our speed. Very good. So, as I was saying, I've run both of them, and I do find that Beedrill actually has a bit more viability toward a later end of a game, whereas Caterpie is pretty strong, especially Butterfree is pretty strong if you pick Charmander as your starter in these games and you really need to find alternatives to help you through that Brock fight. I have found that Butterfree can do some work there with Confusion, definitely better than Beedrill. However, Beedrill in these early games, especially when you don't have a ton of options to fight against Sabrina later on, who is the Psychic gym leader, I have found that Beedrill can be a viable alternative, especially in a Nuzlocke playthrough. So I think I've mentioned this before, but a Nuzlocke is a playthrough that you can do where you end up, the only Pokemon you can catch is the very first one you face on a route. If you don't catch that Pokemon, you don't get an encounter for that route, or you lose your encounter for that route. And those are the only Pokemon you can use in the game. If a Pokemon faints, it is considered dead. You're not allowed to use it for the rest of the playthrough. So you really have to be thinking ahead sometimes about, okay, well, which Pokemon am I going to use for this fight and that fight? I have found that sometimes in a Nuzlocke type run like that, if you get a Beedrill can be pretty helpful in tanking hits and dealing out some super effective damage towards some of Sabrina's Pokemon, which is always helpful. Sometimes in a Nuzlocke, you don't want to think this way, but you do have to keep what's considered cannon fodder. And there's Scratch, what we were talking about. Let's switch to Mama. Kakuna can only use defense increasing moves, so it's going to be a bit of a grind, but we can use Mama here. If it gets a little boring, we can switch back to Squirt. But anyway, as I was saying about a Nuzlocke, sometimes it's really good to have some cannon fodder in a Nuzlocke. You never really want to set up a Pokemon to die, but I have found that there are so many encounters, and you only have 6 Pokemon on your team, that sometimes you want to have a strong Pokemon that you've trained up, so that way you can use them in certain fights that you can say, all right, well, you know what, if they end up being knocked out, it's not the end of my run. because I have had some runs end or come near an end just because I lost a valuable team member because I needed to use them in a fight they shouldn't have been put into. All right, we have another Weedle. Let's keep Mama in. I'm not sure in this game, but I know in most Pokemon games, if you are a certain type, you can't be affected by a status affecting that type. So for example, most poison types, I believe all poison types, cannot be poisoned, aside from some rare circumstances. I think that's also the case in Generation 1, where because Mama is a poison type, she won't be able to be poisoned, and so now that she's a high enough level, we can use her to fight off some of these Weedles for us and not have to risk getting poisoned and then running back to go heal up. Okay, well thank you Bugcatcher for your donation. I'll consider that one of our first donations on this channel. Alright, we have another Kakuna. Let's see. Yeah, let's fight this Kakuna. I think that we're going to want to... I don't think we want to run away right here. We don't want to quite fight this Kakuna, or catch this Kakuna right now. Yeah, I think we want the experience more than we want someone else for our party. I'm not going to be running Kakuna or Butterfree in this run, just because I have run them plenty of times in my life of playing Pokemon. The antidote is great to have. Items, though, in this game are... I don't believe there's anyone up there. But items in this game can be tough to come by, and they also can be difficult to use because you have limited item space. Wow, we were having some low encounters there. And here is Kakuna's counterpart, Metapod. The encounter table is pretty interesting in the forest. So you end up being able to get the evolved forms of Caterpie and Weedle in Metapod and Kakuna. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to run one of those Pokemon. The reason why I wouldn't really recommend it is because you don't have any attacking moves on Metapod and Kakuna. So it requires a lot of switch training. And I know that we just evolved Mama pretty quickly and got Mama leveled up pretty fast. But a lot of that is through battles that we just did. You had a rival fight and those first few battles in the forest here. By the time you catch a Metapod or Kakuna, first off, you're going to have passed a lot of those battles. So you're not going to have that experience available to you. The second issue you're going to have with it is that I believe they require more experience to level up because they're an evolved Pokemon. So you have to put in a lot of work to get them raised up. So even though they are technically a little bit stronger, the evolution level at level 7 just doesn't really make it worth it in my eyes for you to be able to justify you catching them as opposed to their unevolved forms. That is a little bit of a theme in Generation 1. In modern Pokemon, a lot of the decisions regarding evolution are taken away from you. So, for example, for most Pokemon, it is better to evolve them as soon as you can get them evolved. That especially is true most times of happiness evolutions, friendship evolutions. So those are Pokemon introduced in Gen 2 and beyond that require a certain level of friendship with you or happiness in order to evolve. And most times you want to do that evolution as soon as you can, really. There's really very little benefit to not doing that evolution as fast as you can. Here, though, in Generation 1, there are a few instances where you might want to hold off on evolving Pokemon. We were just talking about one of them with the Kakuna and the like a Kakuna and a Metapod versus a Caterpie and a Weedle. However, the more common, or more, I would say the one that you have to be really careful of is with evolution stones. So Pokemon like like Vulpix or Growlithe that will evolve when you give them an evolution item. I believe Poliwrath or Poliwhirl to Poliwrath is very similar as well, in that you don't want to necessarily evolve them as soon as you can because they'll stop learning new moves. One of the other really interesting parts about that is they also sometimes can't learn TMs. So I just learned this actually pretty recently, but I believe that in Generation 1 at least, only the unevolved Fire Stone evolutions, so Vulpix and Growlithe, can learn Flamethrower. So if you evolve your Vulpix or your Growlithe into Arcanine or Ninetales in this game, you're not going to be able to teach them Flamethrower or some other TMs. And that could really hamper, I mean, probably the entire reason why you picked that Pokemon. Now, they might learn them by level up. I believe Vulpix might. Or, so, you know, that changes things a little bit. But it is something you have to be careful of. I don't believe the Evolutions have that same problem. I believe the Evolutions, you want to evolve them. There are some moves that are different. Like I think Eevee might learn Quick Attack and some others might not. It does depend a little bit. Now, the encounters are a little bit off here. It seems like we're not getting many Pokemon to show up. There is one Pokemon that if I can get it to encounter, I'd love to show, which is a special encounter that you can find in the forest here. But I don't think we should laugh away at, or run away even from a Metapod. That's some pretty good experience we can get. Oh wow, I didn't even realize we were all out of PP there. Alright, this is going to be a little bit more, I think it's going to take us more turns to take down Metapod from this little tiny bit than it took us to get all the way down there. Let's see, we're both level 11. One of the ways to keep a team rotating and their levels even is by switching your team members up to put the weakest one first. That might leave you to switch training, it might leave you to just keeping it rotated. I always try and keep them in order of lowest level first, and then level them out or list them out based on their hit points, total hit points. So Squirt has a total of 33, Mama has 34, so that's how I just break that tie because they're the same level. That was one thing that I really struggled with, I think, in these early games when I was a lot younger, was getting one super overpowered Pokemon that you don't end up training anyone else on your team. So let's see if we can get another encounter. If we go up and down one more time and we don't face anything, I might go to the next one. All right. Okay, there we go. Wow. That was one of the longest times I've ever had without getting an encounter. At least one of the longest I can remember. Now, Harden will not affect the damage that Squirt can give out with its bubble here because that's a special move. It's funny that we found those two Kakunas earlier too, because Kakuna is actually a higher encounter in red than in blue. You have about a 40% chance of encountering it in red, but in blue, what we're playing, you only have a 5% chance. But there is one other 5% chance Pokemon I want to go after here. If I don't get it, I'll have to figure out how to start and end or how to pause a stream, or maybe I'll figure out how to cut something down. I'm still playing with the Super Nintendo controller. So yesterday I was at my fiance's grandfather's house, and I ended up bringing one of my other controllers. I have a Nintendo GameCube one with me that I modified, and it's another 8-bit Do case or kit that I used. And all of the kits are really plug and play. There we go. We've been playing with fire the entire time. Maybe we'll go up to Pewter City once Squirt faints. We'll stay in this little patch of grass. Alright, well, let's just go up. Okay, so here, we'll talk to these guys later. This is the rest of Route 2. And every time that screen is blinking, that's one hit point, knocking off Squirt because of the poison. Now we're in Pewter City, officially. We'll just stop up here really quick to the Pokemon Center. I always love that they put that into the game. I forgot that they added it in the original games too. In Pokemon Yellow, when you play the Jigglypuff song, your Pikachu actually falls asleep, just like in the anime. So what's funny about the anime too was, I don't know if anyone watched the Super Bowl this year, and Pokemon had a 30th anniversary commercial. They had Lady Gaga singing with Jigglypuff, which I thought was pretty funny. They actually had a lot of really interesting celebrities on there. I thought it was funny that Charles Leclerc, the Formula One racing driver for Ferrari, picked Arcanine as his Pokemon, because I'm pretty sure Arcanine learns extreme speed. And so I thought that was pretty funny, that maybe that was the reason why he ended up picking it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay in this grass for a little bit more and train up a little bit until we get to Brock. So Brock's Pokemon we should not have trouble with because we know Bubble. Well, because Squirt knows Bubble. With Squirt knowing Bubble, we're going to be able to do a little bit more damage to Brock than normally you would with a lot of other Pokemon, because both of his Pokemon, the Geodude and the Onix, are 4 times weak to water. But who knows, maybe you all will see me learning how to pause a recording. I'll see maybe after this fight, I'll see if I know how to do that while we train up a little bit more. I'm using a new software that I've never used before to be able to capture my gameplay here and then to also be able to record it. And it took me a little bit longer to figure some of this out. A lot of times this requires special hardware or different types of hardware for you to be able to work with. So I really have been just experimenting a lot with some of this. And I figured, I don't expect many people to watch or really anyone to to find this. But I still want to make it entertaining in case anyone does like a lot of this play, or just even have this on in the background, or learn how to play the game. But it will be also a learning experience for me and how to work some of this technology and some of this streaming. All right, so let's see. All right, I think this is a good time for me to, why don't I save the game? I'm going to try and pause the recording here, and hopefully I can restart it. If not, this will be the end of, of part 2. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I can't figure any of this out. So maybe we'll just continue to play around here. And yeah, I'll just end up keeping talking, even though I'm not doing that very well right now. See if we can encounter anything. If not, maybe I'll do it off screen, and then on our next stream, or our next recording, I will see what I can come up with. There are a lot of metapods in here, way more than I thought. I was looking at the encounter table, and 40% is pretty wild. Alright, good job, Squirt. Alright, let's continue training a little bit here. Like I said, it's good to train up just a little bit. Here's a Caterpie. Bubble is actually way more effective than I remember in this game. Let's do a few more battles in here. See if we can get the encounter we're looking for. And then if not, head up to Brock, and we can start off the next video trying to continue this encounter. Metapod down. Alright, let's do one more encounter in this grass and then head up. We'll face on Brock. All right, and you know what? I think we're not gonna edit any of this. Part of the fun of a Pokemon game is sometimes this grind. I know a lot of people don't like it. I know a lot of people think that you can avoid it with many types of playthroughs. You know, if you keep your team small, you don't have a tough level curve. I think that it's part of how you get to really interact with a game. And it's how you get to learn your team members. It's how you get to figure out who's strong, who's weak. It's something that I miss about a lot of the older games. With the more modern games, with the experience share set for everyone, I do find that it takes away your ability to really learn your individual team. So what I mean by that is that if you have a really overpowered Pokemon and the rest of your team is gaining experience automatically from that Pokemon, all of a sudden you can just put a guy on the back of your bench and you start to figure out, like, okay, well, this guy just continues to grow levels. You know, you don't have to grind with it, get it up to levels, train it hard, sit here and worry about, okay, well, is Mama gonna learn Scratch soon so I can get 5 additional attack points over a tackle. Okay, let's take down this Metapod. Another thing is maybe I'll learn how to post-production edit some of this stuff. I know that that's a route you don't always... That'll be a new route for me. Although I'm recording this... Well, part of what I'm using to record some of this is through a MacBook. And funny story about this MacBook is I used to have a really old computer, and I used that computer all throughout school. And then I had to take a licensing test to sit for the bar exam. And I learned a week before the exam that my laptop was too old to download the software I needed to download for it. And now that sounds kind of silly, and it sounds like I didn't read the rules. And I probably didn't, and I probably ignored the rules. But in my defense, I had taken a near exact exam with the same software a few months before, and my computer worked totally fine. So, I didn't exactly think that I needed to get a new computer. Well, anyway, I was told about a week before that I needed a brand new computer, and it was during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And I'll tell you, one of the things that was really difficult during that time was there were a lot of chip shortages and supply manufacturing shortages. And it was nearly impossible for me to get a new laptop in time to take this exam. I couldn't use any other laptop that I had. And So what I had to do was I had to buy a brand new MacBook. It was the only thing I could buy, and it was Mac's brand new laptop where they released it with its own chip in it for the first time. So the very first M1 chip, as opposed to using an Intel chip. And the laptop cost a lot of money in order for me to take this exam. And then I used it for, a few months at work. And at the end of that time, though, I started working at a bigger law firm, and I got my own laptop issued through the firm. I feel like I would never use this laptop anymore. I rarely use it except for some personal matters. I say all that because the laptop has a touch editing bar. It has all of these really high-end technology tools that I have never used. So maybe I'll figure out a way to use them in some post-production here. At the very least, we'll gain some levels. And if I can edit this all out, and if no one ever hears this, then you'll all be so surprised when a lot of these Pokemon are higher leveled. I found that this patch of grass has been pretty lucky for us getting encounters. Not the one I want, but... One other thing I don't like about the Universal Experience Share, and I know it sounds like I'm hating on the new Pokemon games, and I'm not. I think that they're very good. I think a lot of them are entertaining. I think that they are taking I think Game Freak and Nintendo are taking some really interesting approaches here to some of the new games. And I hope to explore some of that in a little bit about things that I really like about them. What I am disappointed in with having the Universal Experience Share is that you just can't toggle it. You can't turn it on and off. And the reason why I don't like that is because I do like the grind of being able to sit here and walking in grass and train up your Pokemon. I like being able to stare for a long time at the back sprite of my Pokemon and really get to remember when Squirtle was a Squirtle. And not just stick him on the back of my team and have him level up automatically. I just think that I wish that you could just turn it off. And if you want to make a really quick run through, you're doing a Nuzlocke run, and you want to have other guys gain experience, I think that's totally fine, and you should be able to turn that on if you want. I think it is a great invention. I just think the execution is could stand to be a little bit better. I found a lot of this with the new Pokemon Legends ZA game, which I really, really enjoyed. I thought ZA was a lot of fun. I thought that, I know people had a lot of concerns about the way that the game was laid out, and I think that those are fair. I thought, though, that it was a good in-between. I obviously don't work for Nintendo. I know very little about coding, and I'm not any game freak. But I do think that if they were having issues with being able to render the backgrounds and having pop-in concerns, I think a fair way of dealing with all that was to make the entire game set in a city where you wouldn't have those pop-in problems. I really don't see an issue with that. I think that that's a very fair response to solve, or a good solution to that problem. Now, some people were concerned about the repeating structures. That's fine. I hear you on that. I wouldn't say that Pokemon was ever really well known for some of those design features. I think you could probably say, and maybe people at even Game Freak would tell you, okay, we were given a raw deal when we were told that we had to switch our game from being solely on handheld to now being on a entire console. I think that there are probably many sides to this story, and I don't even know enough about coding and about video game development to speak in an educated sense on any of that. With all that being said, with Legends ZA, I found that I really didn't gain a close attachment to a lot of the Pokemon I was playing with until toward the end of the game when I really had my team set. And then you would be able to switch guys in and out based on having a really tough boss fight. So in that sense, I think that Pokemon is starting to figure out the path to take some of these games. I think that they do seem to have at least 3 streams of games that they're putting out now. You have like the core series games, that you have the generation games that I think are going to be dedicated toward what they've always been dedicated toward. Collection, battling, a mix of everything. I think it's nice though that they're also going to have the Legends games, which are going to be focused a bit more on an adventure RPG and with battling and have some new mechanics to them. And here is the encounter we were looking for. All right, here is Pikachu, and we are so high leveled that I think right now I'm just going to try and throw the Pokeball at him to try and catch him. The series mascot himself, Mr. Pikachu, is caught! All right. There we go. Oh man, hallelujah. Finally we encountered Pikachu. A 5% encounter rate. I think we probably were over that. I think we might have had just a little bit more. So Pikachu is the mouse Pokemon. I believe it's changed to the electric mouse later on. But when several of these Pokemon gather, their electricity could build and cause lightning storms. What are we gonna nickname Pikachu? Of course we want to nickname it. This is gonna be tough. We waited so long to catch this Pikachu. I don't want to spend more time trying to nickname him or come up with a nickname for this Pikachu. What are things you have to usually wait a long time for? Could have probably used a lot of that time to be able to come up with a nickname. Let's go with Sparky. I know Sparky is the name. Do we go with Sparky? Sparky is a name that is close to me because it was my first dog's name. But I know that maybe we could save that for a different dog. Things you have to wait for. You know what? After the MacBook we were talking about, let's name him Mac. And you know, if I figure out a way to edit all of that out in post-production, then we won't know the MacBook that we were discussing. All right. Now, after all of that, let's go. Let's heal up and let's face on seeing some of Pewter City, and let's see a little bit of the gym. So this, I know we went up here a little bit to heal. This is Pewter City. It is the 3rd main city that you see in the game. Pewter City is home to the Rock-type gym leader, Brock. Let's see what we learn about Mac here. All right. Mac looks pretty good. Let's put Mac at the front of our party to gain some experience. Scram. That is also what my fiance says to our cat. Maybe you'll figure out the cat's name soon enough. All right, Pokemon learn new techniques. Some moves like TMs, which we'll learn a little bit about, have to be trained and talk to a Pokemon. One thing I do think the new games get right, though, is about having infinite use TMs. Alright. Let's see. I believe this is the first Pokemon where you can buy potions. We shouldn't need them in this upcoming battle. And I think we could do some solid switch training with Mac. So I'm not sure that we need to really load up on them. Nidoran. We don't even know whether that's a male or female Nidoran like ours. Could be a boyfriend, could be a girlfriend. Alright. Okay. Now, you know, I usually don't go up to the museum here. But why don't we see some of the museum? $50, why not? It's funny, I don't even think, I mean, I think technically it's supposed to be cents in this game. The Aerodactyl fossil. Wonder if we'll see any of these later on. Kabutops, primitive and rare fossil. And a space exhibit. A meteorite from Mount Moon, a moonstone. July 20th, 1969, the first lunar landing. For those of you who are old enough to remember Even Stevens, you'll never forget that date. Wow, look at what she just said. I want a Pikachu, it's so cute. A Pikachu soon, I promise. I feel his pain, trust me. It will take quite some time to find a Pikachu. Alright, well I think that's pretty much it for what you want to see around here in Pewter City. So, let's get ready to face on our very first gym leader in gym battle. The Pewter City Gym is pretty famous. So here you can talk to this statue and you hear that winning trainer is Andrew. So Andrew's already come and beaten Brock. If you talk to this guy, he'll usually give you tips about the gym coming up. So he's no trainer, but he'll tell you how to win. All right, let him take us to the top. So by challenging the order of Pokemon, so he does tell you how to set your team up, and that's pretty helpful. Here we have Mac out first. Again, let's do some switch training on Mac. As you can probably tell by the layout of this gym, you can avoid the trainer through the path on the left. I don't advise that because he's easier than Brock, so you're gonna have to face Brock anyway. Just take the experience. Alright, Mac, we're gonna switch you with Squirt. Okay, Squirt, good job. Ooh, we're gonna have to heal you up. I thought maybe you'd be able to tank some of these Diglett scratches. So Diglett is an interesting little Pokemon. There are a lot of ground types, actually, early on in the game that you face, for this being a rock gym. Okay, Sandshrew. We're going to want to switch train a little bit more. If we have to use a potion, we can. You know what? Actually, let's put Mama in. Let's see what Mama can do here. The sand attack is going to be annoying. I do find that evasion really is a killer, man, in these games. So when you have those evasive moves, it just lowers the chance that your Pokemon's moves actually hit. The reason why that's tough is because you have Yeah, you see, he's dealing equal damage to us as we should be to him. Wow, and now 3 times in a row we miss. Alright, I think... Why don't we take Mama down as much as possible? We can still tank a few more hits, maybe get some better luck. And then hopefully we can either take him out or we'll switch in. We'll put Squirt in. The Sandshrew sprite is pretty funny. He really does look like an armadillo. Right here, which is what I think he's supposed to be. I know his name is based on a shrew. Maybe he's got a little bit of a shrew in him. That's exactly what I didn't want to have happen here. But that should take him out. Okay, good job everyone. Good work, Mac. Alright, let's heal up a little bit before we take on Brock. And then once we take him on, we'll do a little bit more switch training to get Max some more experience before we go on. I kind of have an idea. So I know we spent a lot of time hunting for Mac for our Pikachu encounter. And I really hope that some of the other encounters that we have won't go that long. I have somewhat of an idea about a team that we want to have. I'm still open to switching things up. But as I said, I really want to use Pokemon that I haven't used before in a playthrough. Especially in a Gen 1 playthrough. And I've never really used Pikachu before. I have in the Pokemon Yellow version. Alright, but let's see. Let's talk to Brock. I'm Brock. I'm Pewter's gym leader. I believe in rock-hard defense and determination. That's why my Pokemon are all the rock type. Do you still want to challenge me? Fine then. Show me your best. This gym leader music is iconic. I remember as a kid, every time having to fight these gym trainers and getting that music playing. Geodude here looks like he's got the Gen Z broccoli haircut here. I'm glad they switched up some of these sprites because Geodude looks silly. Alright, way to go, Mac. Alright. Now Onyx here knows a move called Bide, which I'm hoping he uses. Oh, alright, we can take Tackle. Onyx has really, really low attack. Bide here is gonna... Let's hope we can knock him out. So Bide will do back damage. Excellent. So the way that Bide works is Bide is a stored power move. So you will... The turn that you use Bide, and then also the following turn, you will store up energy. And then double the attack, or double the power that you took in on those 2 turns. It's really dangerous for Onyx if you don't have super effective moves. But we don't have to be worried about that because we can knock him out in 2 hits. Excellent job, Squirt, and Brock is down. I took you for granted. As proof of your victory, here's the Boulder Badge. Thank you, Brock. That's an official Pokemon badge. Its bearer's Pokemon become more powerful. The technique Flash can now be used anytime. And we get a ton of money. Now, Brock gives us TM34. TM34 can be taught to Pokemon. It's only good once, so teach the new technique, pick the Pokemon carefully. Contains Bide, the move that we were just talking about. Bide is dangerous, but I don't think we'll use it. Alright, well thank you everyone. Next time we will continue our journey through Pokemon Blue.